I'm interested in this. I mean, like, why is it that so few voices at that time were saying, hold on here? Well, it's not nice to say hold on here when you have people in the street. And you certainly don't want them to hold on. You want them to go forward. You want them to go way forward. Um, but how come there was so little skepticism? How come there was so, and this to me is something I've been thinking about a lot. But before we get into that, I'm going to mention just to follow up on what you said, Tamar. Yeah, the weeks after, on into May, um, there were a lot of things happened. There was an embargo of a big glass factory there in near Yerevan. There were dairy farmers were demanding higher prices for their product. There were big changes. People kicked out of rectorships and leaderships of universities, not just in Yerevan, but in other places. I mean, office workers were going on strike. I mean, there were these sort of wildcat actions that were taking place. It was starting to really, I mean, it was starting to really gain a sort of a what I would call, you know, theoretically, I would call this a revolutionary situation. It was starting to, but there was no leadership. And now this gets back to that question of why people weren't skeptical. And you sort of touched on it there, Tamar. I mean, they didn't have an alternative. They didn't have the vocabulary to be skeptical. I mean, if you think about it, if you've been stripped of a vocabulary to understand the passing scene, then it's going to be pretty easy to manipulate you. And you're
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Other Armenia's podcast. I am your co-host, Tamar Shirinyan.
And I'm your other co-host, Milena Abrahamian.
Today, we are going to be talking to a very special guest. But before we get to that, again, a reminder, go and press the like button. Do it right now. Go on YouTube and press the like button. If you have not yet pressed the like button on any of our other videos, go and do that. Subscribe to our channel. Go and find us on Spotify and rate us there. Leave comments here if you like our conversation today, and share this so that others can also listen and learn. Today, we have as our guest Dr. Markar Melkonian, who is a philosopher and writer. He's located in Los Angeles, California, and is the author of The Wrong Train, Notes on Armenia Since the Counterrevolution, amongst other books and many other articles. So we are very happy to have Dr. Melkonian with us. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Melkonian.
Thank you, Tamar. Thank you, Melina.
So let's dive right into it. So we want to ask you if you could talk about this book, Wrong Train, your latest book, what it's about, what you're trying to do with it, and how you knew all of this so early on.
Okay. Well, it's a small book. It's made up of essays, some essays, about 10 year over a 10-year period, that were published mostly in Het AM. They're very nice. It was nice to have a platform there on Armenia. And yeah, so something like 2008 to 2018. And it ends the last few pages of this book. Here's the book. Here's the book. Whoops. Here's a book. Boom. Yeah, and the last few pages of this book are dedicated to the Velvet Revolution, the so-called Velvet Revolution. And one of the things that I've been told by a couple of people anyway is that, oh, Markar, you know, uh, how did you uh, know that? I mean, you were among a few people, maybe not many at all, who were not that enthusiastic about the Velvet Revolution. That's April, May 2018. The really it was a social kind of movement, I guess, literally a social movement that took place in and around Yerevan and in other cities in Armenia to get rid of the old guys, kick the bums out, and it was a rallying around the figure of a at that time he wasn't that well known. He was well known in Armenia, but not that well known. A guy named Nigel Pashinyan, and so a lot of stuff was happening at that time too, especially toward as this thing worked its way out. This social movement worked out. Interesting things, but um, I wrote this article. When my article appeared in Head, I got a lot of sort of grumpy feedback from commentators who are like basically something like, "Come on, get with it, man. This is great. This is wonderful. This is a new thing. It's a velvet revolution, you know." And at the very beginning, I'm thinking, Velvet Revolution? You mean like what took place in the former Czechoslovakia? You mean that kind of thing? That's not a real inspiring name for something, first of all. You're going to split the country into two little countries that hate each other now, the Czech Republic or Czechia and Slovakia. You're going to hate, you do this and then you get all of these businessmen in there and all of the entrepreneurship that was taking place. No, I wouldn't want a velvet revolution for Armenia. First of all, there was no revolution at all. Anyway, so that was sort of the beginning. I mean, just calling it a velvet revolution shows a lot of kind of disorientation and misunderstanding going on here. Why would you call it was going on in Yerevan in April, May 2018, a velvet revolution? And then it gets to the question, why would you call it a revolution? It wasn't a revolution.
Well, Markar, why would you? Well, why do you think?
Well,
I'm
it's very
curious.
simple. A revolution is a change of class leadership, a change of class rule. You overthrow an old ruling class, you replace it with a new ruling class. And what happens typically with a revolution, a real revolution, institutions change. From the bottom up, these institutions change. The personnel changes, sure, but a thorough changing of the highest ranking institutions, personnel in the highest ranking, but the assumptions and the outlook, change with the change of class. It's class rule. That didn't happen. That didn't happen in 2018. And people say, well, the people took power. I'm always skeptical of that kind of thing. The people took power. Yeah, the people take power all the time, don't they? Well, but that seems too vague. And now we hear, just like last week or a couple of days ago, the present prime minister of Armenia is talking about that. Hey, yeah, we are just an expression of the people. What we do, something new has happened. This is a new situation where in the past, um, the leaders of the country had sort of told the people what to do. In this case now, the people are telling the leadership what to do. And the proof of that is me. I'm standing here. I am the proof, the living proof that things have changed. There's like a revolution. What the people I embody, I'm the embodiment of the people. So yeah, that's yeah, it's easy to make to make light of that. And again, I want to say at the beginning, I do not want to be I feel uncomfortable dumping on the present prime minister and the administration. I don't want to come off as just exclusively criticizing them. We Armenians find ourselves in a place now, you know, after 34 years, right? We just, the anniversary of the so-called independence of this country, we find ourselves in a situation where, oh, yeah, oh, so we got these guys in power, we want them out of power. But the problem is, who's going to take power after them? What indication is there that the people who are going to take power, you get rid of this guy, that the people who are going to take power again are going to be better than him? You know, this I felt that way about the first post-Soviet administration, Levon Petrosyan. His administration didn't agree at all with what he would with his orientation, as far as I understood it. I'm not an expert on these things, but we all have to try to make sense of the passing scene as best we can. I didn't support him at all, but boy, there were some people, you know, dumping on Levon Petrosyan who were way worse. I knew some of them, way worse than Levon Petrosyan. So you have to walk a fine line here. It's a sad situation. It would be kind of nice if we could get you know, the country would be a country where at some point where people could actually vote for something they actually believe in, where you actually have alternatives, real alternatives, instead of, you know, this wide array of
Why?
self-described political parties that are just, you know, one man shops too. Very few of them are headed by women. So, you know, so anyway, this was a sort of a position of skepticism or reticence that I expressed in 2018, and then people said, well, hey, how did you know that? Well, I did. First of all, I didn't know it. I strongly suspected it. We can't know about the future, but I strongly suspected it. I provided reasons why I suspected it using a very different conceptual vocabulary from the conceptual vocabulary or vocabularies that had been that Armenians have gotten used to over the past 35 years. Very used different, but in any case, explanations using that conceptual vocabulary as to why I strongly suspected that this wasn't going to meet the expectations or the hopes of the people in the streets.
And I think like one really important part of that is that there's two different things, I think, in the way that I understand it now. And I was one of those people who, like, as the protests were happening in the streets in Yerevan and across the country, I was in the United States and I was watching it with great interest and as well as great hope. And talking to some friends who were on the streets and the kinds of things that were being done. And then after the fact, when Pashinyan did come into power and when Sargsyan was ousted from power, as well as, you know, much of the Republican Party was ousted from power, I had this sense like that something had taken place, and over the years that something that has taken place became nothing took place. Things just kind of got more like it seems in hindsight to be more of a class doubling down rather than a kind of revolution where another class takes over. And but there is something else to it, right? Which is like the people who did come out into the streets were really angry, and they
Yes.
didn't have. It's not like they weren't protesting for. Right, as you say, they were protesting against, and the very thing that they were protesting against was oligarchic rule, and that was something that I found in research that I've done is that people were just so like so angry about the class that had been governing them and making decisions for them that had now decided to take over forever, right? Which is like, the constitutional change that allowed Sargsyan to become prime minister after his term as president had ended. And that's what they were against. But it's really interesting that after the fact, that anger in the streets against an oligarchy turned into renaming that class, right? No longer referred to as the oligarchs in Pashinyan and liberal parlance in Armenia. They're now referred to as choshod business, right? So big businessmen. And it's like, wait, isn't that exactly like what we were all talking about? And so, like, is this like a different thing now? It's exactly the same thing, right? It's the owner class. So the same thing around which people were so angry is still in power, right? After all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's basically what I was saying. You kick the bums out. Well, the same, the faces changed, the personnel changed, some of the personnel changed, um, but it was the same, say, class, the same plutocracy, the same oligarchy, the same, it's just a different part of the same oligarchy. And this thing happens in all of these so-called democratic countries in the West, or genuinely democratic, but a certain kind of limited democracy that, including the country that I'm sitting in right now. Um, yeah. So, I mean, some orientations changed. I mean, at the margins. I mean, there was a shift towards Europe. I guess under Pashinyan. Okay, fine. If people want to make a big deal about that, that's fine. And we could talk about that too, because I think this is, that's connected to the maybe the theme of the aftermath of this Velvet Revolution. Um, I'm interested in this. I mean, like, why is it that so few voices at that time were saying, hold on here? Well, it's not nice to say hold on here when you have people in the street. And you certainly don't want them to hold on. You want them to go forward. You want them to go way forward. Um, but how come there was so little skepticism? How come there was so, and this to me is something I've been thinking about a lot. But before we get into that, I'm going to mention, just to follow up on what you said, Tamar. Yeah, the weeks after, on into May, um, there were a lot of things happened. There was an embargo of a big glass factory there in near Yerevan. There were dairy farmers were demanding higher prices for their product. There were big changes. People kicked out of rectorships and leaderships of universities, not just in Yerevan, but in other places. I mean, office workers were going on strike. I mean, there were these sort of wildcat actions that were taking place. It was starting to really, I mean, it was starting to really gain a sort of a what I would call, a theoretically, I would call this a revolutionary situation. It was starting to, but there was no leadership. And now this gets back to that question of why people weren't skeptical. And you sort of touched on it there, Tamar. I mean, they didn't have an alternative. They didn't have the vocabulary to be skeptical. I mean, if you think about it, if you've been stripped of a vocabulary to understand the passing scene, then it's going to be pretty easy to manipulate you. And you're also going to be in a situation where you're constantly being like gravity, you're being pulled back to the kinds of assumptions and the sort of the view of the world that legitimizes the way things have been going. And you don't like the way things are being going, but your vocabulary, the only vocabulary you have for understanding what's going on, is this vocabulary. It's like you're caught. And so there is no real. And so we get back to this common,
Yeah,
the
can you
common.
say what is the vocabulary that you're talking about, just so that it's clear for
Oh, okay.
people?
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I'm talking about, you could call it the most general way. You could call it scientific naturalism. They call it that, scientific materialism, a naturalistic view. And if you're applying that to a human community like Armenia, that means you've got to understand power. You got to understand, you got to understand class rule. You got to understand how that is associated with governance, day-to-day, moment-to-moment governance in the country. That's a big deal right there. You've also got to understand power in terms of the, the international or the external power. External power, and then, there's there is, I don't know how to avoid the term imperialism. Sorry, but
But it's so
oh,
important that you
oh, he's
don't
that
agree
kind
with
of
it.
guy. Yeah, imperialism. I'm sorry, it's a real thing. It's a process. It's play right now, moment to moment, it's playing itself out in a jillion different ways. You got to understand that as a compound. And there's zero, nothing to this day, nothing, no discussion whatsoever of imperialism. This planet, large sections of this planet are being ravaged. Um, yeah, yeah, okay. We'll just leave it at that. Ravaged by these processes, these complex processes, all sorts of process, economic and financial and military and geostrategic, all whatever
And genocidal.
that we can call imperialism. If you don't have a vocabulary that include, that can grapple with these realities of power, then you're lost. You're lost in the country. And that means one thing, the struggle for hegemony is over. There's no struggle for hegemony. They already have hegemony. The bad guys, they already have hegemony because you're that's the vocabulary. You're trying to express your opposition using their vocabulary, and their vocabulary, by the way, is very importantly inaccurate. You know, you know. I mean, sorry, it's the post-Soviet era. I get it. Truth doesn't matter. We get it. Truth is like laughable. Okay, to a certain extent, truth is laughable in the post-Soviet period. But I mean, but accuracy to a certain extent is very useful. For example, now we can get to, the sorts of pitfalls of having an inaccurate description of the passing scene. We Big pitfalls, like for example, oh, Azerbaijan is threatening Armenia. So we need an external guarantor. Russia has betrayed Armenia, stabbed us in the back. Can't be Russia. America. 6,800 miles away. We're going to go for. Hey, when has America ever betrayed us? When has America ever made promises to Armenia that it has betrayed? Never. Never. Yeah. So we go to these people who've kicked us in the teeth over and over and over again for 140 years. The United States has been kicking us in the teeth ever since the missionaries, Crimean War, the missionaries, and then the mandate for Armenia, and then the Cold War, and that great thing they brought independence and freedom to Armenia. That was another betrayal. In 35 years retrospect, we can take that as another crime that America has committed against Armenia, against the Armenian people, against future generations of Armenia. The fact that America was so instrumental in helping to destroy the Soviet Union, that is a crime against the Armenian nation, against the Armenian people, and against future generations of Armenians. I'm looking forward here. Let's not say that this is a guy who's angry about something that happened. I am. You'd have to be a fool not to be. But I'm looking forward here. Now, Tripp, talking about aftermath of that Velvet Revolution. the kinds of assumptions that are being made here. Now, I want to preface this by saying I don't know the details of TRIP. You don't know the details of TRIP. I've been all over the internet. I've been talking to people. They don't know the details of TRIP. Now, isn't that interesting? The, the fact that this isn't it interesting that we still don't know, and they initialed it, they didn't sign it. How is it going to be? What is this American, these contractors? What exactly are they going to do along that 29-mile border with Iran?
What's also really baffling about all of it is that there's this kind of sense of like some have talked about it as like finally, someone is helping us with this agreement with and this idea that this is going to bring something to Armenia, to Armenians, right? That somehow it's an agreement. So clearly agreements are between two parties,
It
right?
is
So
going to bring something, a catastrophe.
going to bring catastrophe, and it's so clear it's going to bring catastrophe. Like, how do you take a
It
small
might not.
country,
It might not
small
bring
country in the
catastrophe, but
Caucasus, where
yeah,
you divide that country from its you divide it from its border with another pretty major power in the region that has actually been very good to Armenia, right? As well as create an enmity with Armenia's number one economic partner, and somehow that's going to be good for Armenia in the region. Like it's baffling. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Terrifying. I live
baffling.
here.
Yeah, you put it very well. It is baffling, and it might not be. It might not be a disaster. But the thing is, it might be. And that is a reality today that it might be. That uncertainty is a reality today. Okay. And you just got to, and it might be undone. It was obviously theatrics. I mean, it was this character, my president of my country here in the United States of America. I mean, this guy's like P.T. Barnum, among other things. I mean, he's a circus barker. Okay, and he's got a big ego, and all of these people, Aliyev and Pashinyan, and they all know that, and and they think they're going to be real smart and clever by working with his ego, and they certainly don't want to get on his bad side. Okay, so yeah, so they do this. So we've got some contractors now. This trip, TRIPP, it could be a tripwire. I mean, we saw this happen. We saw this. We've seen this happen over and over again. You get American contract, Fallujah. You get an American contractor on the ground in your country. Then, little story here. Let's just dream up a little story. The American contractors, they're doing what they're doing. By the way, what the hell are they doing? Making a road? We've had Chinese contractors making roads all over Armenia for years. What are you getting these guys involved with? Okay, Yerevan is closer to Lhasa, Tibet than it is to Lisbon, Portugal. What the hell are you dealing with these guys 6,800 miles away? Even aside from their record. Okay, so you get these guys involved, and then there's a report that somebody from the Iranian side has been shooting at them, the American contractors. Now, it just so happens, our little story here, there's a confluence. There's a confluence here. America and its regional surrogate Israel, maybe Turkey too. They want to make a deal out of it. It just so happens that, hey, today's a good day to make a big deal of this thing. They shot at us. The Iranians shot at Americans. Oh, now suddenly you've opened the door for an American aggression from Armenia against Iran. Okay, now where is this leading? Well, let's do it. Let's look from the imperialist point of view, from the American imperialist point of view. Maximax. Okay, this is the Maximax approach. Okay, this is a term from mainstream economics. The maximum good that can come from the situation. The maximum assumptions and the maximum we can expect from those assumptions. Okay, from the imperialist perspective, it's this. We do to Iran what we did to Iraq. You know how America, according to Donald Trump, and it's true too, he asked most Armenians on the streets in Yerevan, certainly in Glendale, they'll tell you all the good that America has done for the world, all of the good that America, well, they're going to do some good for Iran, just like the good that they did for Iraq, just like the good that they did for Libya, the good that they did for Syria, the good that they've done for all of these countries. They're going to do a good thing like that for Iraq. They're going to smash it into pieces. Okay, let's just take it from there. Smash it into pieces. Now, what piece is that on the other side of that 29-mile border with Iran? What piece is that? That is southern Azerbaijan. Okay, so we're going to have, instead of having a 29-mile border with Iran, a country that has treated everybody, every Armenian, across adult, across the political spectrum that I know of, has to admit Iran has been fair to Armenia. Armenia is our only contiguous neighbor that has really their state interests are our state interests. They dovetail. Okay, so we remove that. Now what do we have? Okay, so now we got Azerbaijan, the Republic of Azerbaijan, we've got Turkey, we've got Vyrastan, and we've got southern Azerbaijan. We have no contiguous border with Iran. Yeah. So this is the kind of good that America can bring to that region for Armenia, just like the good that they brought to Armenia in 34 years ago or 40 years ago when they started all this stuff. This is the kind of so. This is what happens when the most elementary kind of considerations of power come into play.
So, Markar,
when you ignore this kind of power, imperialism, you ignore that, and Russia's an imperialist country too, thanks to Gorbachev and Yeltsin and all of that. It is now an imperialist country too. So we're talking about American imperialism. Trip could be a tripwire, just in that little story I told you, could be. It probably won't. I'd certainly hope it isn't. It could be a tripwire for American military intervention in this region.
So you've mentioned the breakup of the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Soviet Union already, and you use the word counter-revolution in your book, and from the essays that begin in 2008 that don't begin in 2018. I mean, I'm clearly from what you've told us, you consider perhaps, I mean, I consider 2018 a counter-revolution. 2018 was a doubling down of the power relations that existed already. It was not an overturning of those, which is how I would define counter-revolution. I was wondering about your sense of counter-revolution when it comes to 1991, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, okay. I guess I would respectfully disagree with you. You might be right about 2018. I don't consider that either a counter-revolution, or I don't consider it a counter-revolution or a revolution, but for the reason I just gave about class. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of reading lately on the last 5 years of the existence of the Soviet Union, and I've changed my views on this. Before, I was one of those people who said, like a lot of people, it had to happen. This was it. It was just a matter of it had to happen. And Levon Der-Petrosyan, who seemed at the time to be happy to take credit for helping to destroy the Soviet Union. The story since then has been, oh, we had to get out from underneath this. The train was going off a cliff. Armenia had to jump off the train. to paraphrase a famous essay that came out at that time. I don't think so. I don't think that it had to happen that way at all, any more than there had to be a counter revolution in China with Tiananmen Square, any more than there had to be, or turn it around, any more than there had to be talk to former Yugoslav, talk to Serbs, talk to Croats, talk to Slovenia, talk to them about the inevitability of the destruction of Yugoslavia. Talk to them about that. Any of them, non Montenegrins, the ones that are left in Montenegro, Kosovar, none of them. They all look back. They said if they gave a gold medal in Olympics for stupidity, Yugoslavia deserved that gold medal. No, and there was a great deal of intervention. I don't want to be conspiratorial here. It wasn't, well, there were lots and lots of conspiracies, lots of different conspiracies by different groups. So a conspiracy theory is not a very good explanatory framework at all. It wasn't a matter of conspiracy, but it was a confluence of all sorts of events. And if some of these events didn't happen, we would be living in a different reality right now. Armenia would have, a couple million higher population, better educated. Its borders would be secure, and so on and so forth. If just a few things, other things, you could, tell a little story, and it'd be plausible. Just a few other things hadn't happened. If they had gotten someone other than Gorbachev, if Chernobyl and the Armenian earthquake, and and on it goes, and in Afghanistan, if so, you could tell a story. So I am a materialist. I am a naturalist. I believe in a naturalistic view of things, and I believe that human beings are part of nature and fit into this naturalistic view of things. And so you need a theory, a materialist or naturalistic theory of how human societies work. And so as such, I reject determinism. I reject historical determinism. And this is a thing that I've never subscribed to historical determinism, but it became very clear to me doing this recent reading that I did on the final 5 years of the Soviet Union that this didn't have to happen. I mean, I guess in a sense, this had to happen. It's like since the beginning of time, I had to do that. In a sense, you could say, but that's just using the term "had to happen" as just a synonym for saying it happened. You know, sure, the destruction of the Soviet Union happened. You want to say it had to happen, but if you do say it had to happen, all you're saying is that it happened. No, I don't think it in any substantive way, any theoretically satisfying way, it had to happen. No, not economically. No, it was a confluence of very unfortunate events, that resulted in this.
You're a philosopher, so I want to ask you this. You're using the term historical naturalism and not historical materialism.
Oh, I didn't use the word historical. No, I would say historical materialism the main social science would be historical materialism for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be nice if if that vocabulary were a little more current in Yerevan?
But that vocabulary did exist. That vocabulary existed in
And
Yerevan. It
it did.
existed in
People are saying
Armenia.
it didn't. People are saying it didn't really, but no, in 1985, we met people who were actual Marxists, and we not just actual Marxists. We met people who were honest, and I don't want to make too big a deal of this thing. Most people weren't, but they were honest, and they were workers, and they were proud of workers. And you could
And now,
actually,
I mean,
this is
when you
before you guys were born. It was a different country. You could run into people on the streets of Yerevan who are like workers and proud to be workers. 35 years of indoctrination have gotten rid of that. Nah, if you're a worker, you're ashamed that you're a worker.
And that's why, I mean, I understand why you don't see 2018 as a counter revolution. In some ways I might agree with you there. But one reason why I want to read it as a counter revolution was I think that that moment is more than just a kind of regime change. What it also was um, the kind of sedimentation of a liberal idea that this is the correct vocabulary, this is the only proper political vocabulary, this is the only way that we can speak, and of course that's US speak, it's Western Europe speak, and
Mm,
that has now become, right, like, if you are not speaking that language, there's something perverse about you and your political ideas, right? Whereas I think before that moment, it was actually possible to speak various other vocabularies. And some of those vocabularies did, I mean, at that point, by 2018, not exactly, Bolshevism, but there were some remnants and traces. And I think that 2018 was really the finality of um of that. It was the death knell of whatever traces remained of a worker state.
uh-huh. Interesting. Milena, what do you think of that? I know, mulling. We're all mulling it over.
I mean, you also have to understand that I'm not an academic, so like I have a different vocabulary. I mean, you're like I speak differently, maybe. But I think yeah, I think it makes sense, Tamad, what you're saying. I'm just not sure if it was 20. I mean, I feel like, yeah, I mean, I think it was happening since the fall of the Soviet Union already, and it was just accumulating and accumulating. And then in 2018, yeah, like I mean, the word that you used was like the finality of that. So I think it, yeah, we
Yeah,
could say
I got
that.
to think about that too. I think that there's a lot to say about that. Um, Now you say that because well now when we're talking about discourse, we're talking about like the kind of talk. I guess in Armenia there's well first of all last time I was in Hayastan it was a couple of years I was planning to be there last year I went planned to go there now but I planned to be there last year it didn't happen because of something else but it was 2 years ago or whenever it was last I was in Hayastan this word neoliberalism you didn't, it wasn't a word you used in polite company. Like neoliberalism did not elicit a good expression from your interlocutor. Okay. People don't like that word. And well, Milena, what, that word isn't very popular, right? Is it in Hayastan? I mean, I don't think that, I wouldn't imagine it's gotten any more popular than it was 2 years ago. So it's something interesting here. And this guy, David Harvey, this great geographer, economist, geographer, David Harvey, talks about this really well in his book on neoliberalism. Something strange has taken place since 28, maybe since 2008, if we want to give it a number, maybe since 2008. Neoliberalism, when we speak of neoliberalism, there are two things we can talk about. There's neoliberalism as a policy orientation. It's a raft of policy positions, privatization and the social thing and liberalization and removal of capital constraints and you know on and on it goes. Anyway, in Armenia, privatization was a big part of it. Okay, so there's an actual sorry a policy orientation of neoliberalism. And then there's also neoliberalism as a kind of a catchphrase, kind of a feel good catchphrase. neoliberalism. And it sort of meant it was much vaguer. It was a much vaguer thing. It was something about free markets and efficiency and all of this stuff. And the only way to go, it was the only way. The only future was no future. The only future was what we got now, and that's free markets and so forth. So there were these two things. One was a policy orientation neoliberalism, and one was a kind of a rhetorical grab bag kind of thing. The rhetorical grab bag is over. It's here in the United States, in Latin America for sure, in other parts of the world. If you're a neoliberal dictator or a elected official, you don't say you're a neoliberal. I mean, you're not going to get support from your constituents. You're not going to get votes by describing yourself as neoliberal anymore. That's over. The legitimating function of that word is gone. All of their promises, they have not delivered on. It's been decades, very propitious circumstances. They have failed to live up to one of their advertised promises. Failed to live up to one. You go through it with Armenia, just in your own head. Go through all of the promises that they were making back in the 90s, in the 90s about neoliberalism. In the 80s, people in Yerevan were listening to this stuff in the late 80s. Okay, so every single one of them they betrayed. Instead of affluence, we got austerity. Instead of peace, we got war. Instead of a flourishing culture, renaissance, we got the opposite, whatever the hell it is. We got demoralization instead of happiness. So all of these things have eluded us. All of the promises of neoliberalism, that as an ideology. But, and this is what David Harvey says, and this is very interesting. Actually, it's not that interesting. And that is, the policy orientation is in place. It's going. It's doing its thing for the people who benefit from it. It's just doing it. Hey, what do you do under these circumstances? You're benefiting from, privatization and capital liberalization and all of the rest of this stuff. You're benefiting from it. But you can't, that old word isn't working. What are you going to do? Oh, well, mm, we could say, I hate immigrants. How's that? I hate immigrants. The whole, yeah. So, blah, on and on it goes. I hate people who don't look exactly like me. I hate, I hate that. I hate people who don't like, I like boys. I hate girls who girls. This kind of thing. Get all sorts of. It's the old switch and bake. It's the old. It's the distraction thing, which is ancient. It's an ancient rhetorical device. You know. I'm stealing. I'm picking your pocket, and I go like this, and I pick your pocket. So that's what's happening. The neoliberalism isn't going by that name anymore. And now we've got a guy, the current prime minister, who's, like 100 other guys in Latin America, in the Caribbean, in Eastern Europe, and 100 other these charlatans who they're right out of the Trump distraction playbook, right out of the Trump distraction playbook, and so it's like that. He's a neoliberal, but he can't admit it. He can't admit he's a neoliberal, and so there we go. Interesting. Legitimacy, legitimation, the legitimacy of a regime, your representatives. It turns out, and I don't know how to explain it, but it seems to be an observation, and I want to put it by you guys and see what y'all think of it, that legitimation isn't necessary to keep your regime going. as long as there is no organized opposition, as long as the quote unquote opposition is the same, represents the same class interests, uses the same, has the same way of understanding the passing scene as you do. If there's no organized, genuine organized opposition, you can be illegitimate and just keep going. What do you think of that? I'm talking about Armenia today. What do you think of that?
I mean, one way that this used to also happen before Pashinyan's time was the way in which the various parties who were not the ruling party, like Bhargava Chayastan, for example, claimed to be the opposition, and the way in which they would vie for power from time to time. But essentially, I mean, these were the same party. They were just it was basically an intercapitalist warfare of sorts, like
Not even much of a warfare.
gangsters party versus another gangsters party, but they had class solidarity, right? They all wanted the same thing essentially.
Yeah.
And now that's happening in other, through other means too. Yeah.
To me, it's not just a matter of, it's not at all even a matter of, you know, isms or people say, it's a framework or a grid that you apply, drape over over the landscape. It's not a matter of that. It's a matter of trying to making sense of the passing scene. And if you don't have, I don't know, Armenia is as good an example as any country. If you don't have an alternative way of viewing the passing scene, then good luck with being a genuine opposition. I mean, there are some counter examples one could bring up, but in general, there's no, people don't have a choice for one thing. What's the difference between you and them? Oh, we want the bums out. Okay, we've kicked the bums out over and over again in Armenia. We kick the bums out, and then it don't turn out good. It don't turn out good. Each time we kick the bums out, lo and behold, you know. So no, you need a new. There has to be a different force with a different vocabulary, representing a different class, and yeah, without that, we're just going to keep going around and around in this circle here, which is fine if you're America. Actually, it's not fine, but it's really not fine if you're Armenia. A little country like ours, landlocked, impoverished, with its neighbors. No, it's not okay to just keep going around and around and around in these circles. It's not okay to be misapprehending reality. It is not okay to this situational unawareness, to just continue with this kind of situational unawareness, not understanding what's going in terms of power. What took place on 8 August was like a lesson in I want to say insouciance, a lesson in a kind of evasive way of thinking, an evasive way of thinking, pretending it's all okay, pretending everything's okay. Do you ever get the feeling when people talk about stuff like that, you're being gaslit? The pundits, too, online. Oh, well, such and such an Iranian spokesperson on such and such a date said that he didn't mind it that much, and blah, 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 blah. What? They've just been attacked by the United States and its surrogate, Israel. 900, more than 900 of their citizens were killed. America has said they want that country, they want that country overthrown. And then you're saying that contractors control over Armenia's 29-mile border with Iran. Oh, no, and then so and so again on another such and such a person, a spokesperson, the Iranian Ministry of such and such said that, well, and he used this term and he used the term route instead of what? This is gaslighting. Of course, this is a country that's under siege, literal siege. I mean, whatever else we may say about the Islamic Republic of Iran, it is a country under siege. Of course, this is a threat. Of course, TRIP is a threat to Iran. How big a threat? We don't know. That's a problem. That we don't know. We don't know how big a threat this is. And it's interesting that we don't know, too, considering the stakes for Armenia. Now, this kind of gaslighting, you know what I mean? It's like these pundits get on there and they have these sort of, oh, well, the opportunities, and they're going to have this, and there's going to be trade, and there's going to, come on.
Well, the peace, I mean, for me, it was like gaslighting that moment that we saw the historic moment of peace where, Pashinyan and Aliyev shake hands and Trump, you know, we can call it like baptizes their handshake by putting his hand over theirs. Like, I mean, that sickening image,
It's
right?
sickening. It's touching. Azerbaijan and Albania, these things, and they're suddenly great friends. Are you
Cambodia.
very touching? It's,
Yeah, it's and for me it's like when US media is going to be US media. I mean, this is all corporate media. We're very well aware of that. What I've found quite troubling is the way in which Armenian scholars and others, I'm not going to name anybody, but I, have read some commentary on this plan as this is going to bring good things to the region. This is very welcome. This is a good step for Armenia. And it's like really shocking, that I'm not an expert on geopolitics. But it's so very obvious that this is terrible, like this is, and where we're talking like right on the heels where the destruction of Syria is now full on, right? Like you just, I mean, it took a while, but in about 13 years, they completely destroyed a country, completely. Perhaps even worse than they destroyed Iraq or they destroyed Afghanistan. I mean, they completely destroyed Syria, and the same parties involved in that are now bringing peace. It's really like there's this gaslighting is one term, but it's a cognitive dissonance is perhaps another term that we might use. And I think this also has a lot to do with what you were talking about, neoliberalism having these two parts to it. One of them being the actual economic and political economic policy, and the other being this kind of the way in which it's talked about and the discourse around it, which also has homo economicus par excellence, right? The idea of like the fully free individual who lives on the market, right? That's also a part of it, what neoliberalism means. But that idea, that second part, has been sold so successfully, we might say, that it's almost as if there is no alternative to that narrative, right? There's no alternative, and this is really terrifying to me, not just for Armenia, right? Like whether Armenia continues to be, clearly it's not currently a fully sovereign state, but whether it continues to have some semi-sovereignty over the years is one question. But for the world, right? Because we this is a killing of imagination. And Milena, I was thinking recently a lot with the conversation that we have a lot about possibility, right? And the whole like that's impossible, right? This whole like killing of anything that's not pragmatic or practical in the status quo, in the structures that currently exist, right? And, so if you say something that desires another world, that desires some other possibility, there's something wrong with you. You're perverse, you're stupid, you're whatever it might be. And that to me is the most dangerous move, right? The killing of imagination and the killing of even being able to see, as you say, Markar, the moving scene in front of you, right? Like not even being able to recognize that anymore.
But can I just say something about killing of imagination? I mean, obviously there's the act of killing the imagination. I tell you, I imagined this, and you just kill it, right? But I think there are other factors at play for killing imagination to begin with. Um, I, I, I'm realizing, I mean, obviously, like this is part of the reality, but it's not every day that I realize that I'm living in a nation, in a land and a place where we are grieving, and it's 5 years. Like just now, this is September 2025. In 2020, we went through a whole war, and like so many lives were lost, and this is part of the reality that I think is not, it's so difficult to even speak about, to like bring into the picture. As you say, Markar, I really like the way you say it, the passing scene. This is part of the passing scene here. And I think that when you're grieving, that is one place or one factor of like that it's hard to imagine. And I think when you are also under like obviously like the grieving part of the loss is part of it, but also the fact of an actual war that we experienced here is part of that killing of imagination for me as well. Because it's not like we could say, oh, like I wish there was no war. Like it's just happening, right? So it's a fact that there is that war happening. Um, so I think, and then now also with the gaslighting of like, oh, like this is peace now. I mean, that is like a whole other level of killing imagination. It's just a whole other level of like, I keep thinking now we're speaking, I keep thinking about our guests who were speaking about um, psychic refusal. So Lara Sheehy and Stephen Sheehy. And I'm constantly thinking about how the only way to kind of, well, obviously like it's really important to have like critical skills, critical thinking skills. But it's like even me, like I'm a sort of in many ways a product of the sort of the West, right? I was an immigrant in the U.S., and so I went to a liberal arts university, and I like learned a lot of like things there about the things that I'm, still believing in, and like feminism and all of these political things, right? But I remember being like actually like later on I realized that I believed something that I saw in the news during the time that you're talking about with August 8th. And there was some, like Radio Free Europe, Azatutun went to the South and was interviewing people. And there was like two guys who like were older, and like it seemed like they knew, like it really affected the way I perceived, right? And they were like basically saying that it could be a good thing. And I remember being affected by that. And like later on, I was like, wait a minute, why did they choose to show me that in this particular time? Like later on, I started to think about it. So it's like, I think it's really exhausting also to have to constantly like be like, we're already constantly on alert, because we are not really sure like when is the next attack, or like, but it's like,
Yeah.
not just attack in terms of war, but like the economic reality, right? The social reality, like people are not okay here, like that's just the reality. So that's exhausting in itself to kind of like wake up every day and sort of like live that, and then go to sleep, wake up and live that, and then to have to also constantly like refuse lies so that you're not like being gaslit, it's an enormous task, and it becomes even more enormous if you're doing it alone. And I think that, yeah, I think that there's a lot of loneliness in grief, and it's yeah.
That's part of it, isn't it? Convincing us, me as much as you, that we're alone, but we're not. You talk to people, I mean, for what it's worth, you talk to people.
I don't think we're alone, honestly, but I
Yeah.
think that there's a loneliness to grieving.
Hmm. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Then, so, um, we're practical people. We want peace, and like our very pious friends in Qatar, like our very pious friends in Qatar, we want America to come and ensure our safety. We want what could be better? Well, let's see, Armenia, we could give them a big military base, the way our very pious, God-fearing friends in Qatar gave the Americans a big military base. We could do that, and that's for sure. That's for sure going to make sure that we're not attacked by a foreign country. Certainly not our capital city is not going to be attacked. If we give them a huge, and to sweeten the deal, because we're pragmatic, but we can't afford this, a $400 million jet. Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out. So Pashinyan, we're going to have these Americans, um, Americans on our border. They're going to be, you know, hey, hey, Azerbaijan, keep your hands off of America. Keep your hands off of Albania. Keep your hands off Albania because we're here. The Americans are here. See, they're Americans. You see, look, they look American. There they are. They're standing tall on our border. Okay, now one of the problems is this, and I brought up our pious friends in Qatar, and this it applies to Armenia too. Whenever like the three of us get talking like this, it's happening all over the place. It's like, oh, we're just talking off the top over here. We don't know, and we don't know what's going on in the halls of power. We don't know what the real meaning, the real significance of that August 8th agreement was. We don't know what that is. Those guys in power, they know. They rub shoulders with all these powerful, smart people. They have so many resources. Okay. They know. What the hell do we know? Okay, great. Wouldn't that be comforting to just leave it at that? Then we're going to look at 35 years of history in Armenia, starting with the so-called independence. And all of the people at the top there, with all rubbing their shoulders with all the people, where the hell has this gotten us? The suspicions of suspicious people like me borne out over and over and over again. Say the unwarranted or let's see, indefensible suspicions of people like you and me are borne out. In 1991, before you guys were born, probably, I would imagine,
Nope, I was
1991,
born in the Soviet Union and I'm proud of it.
okay.
Yeah, we've
Back
got a
then,
Soviet citizen right here. I was born before 1991.
people would have thought you guys were crazy, and me. Well, they did think. If even 20 years ago, people didn't talk this way 20 years ago. Now you hear, last time I was in Yerevan, everybody's talking. The carpenter's talking this way. The cleaning woman is talking this way. The guy at the store is talking. They're all talking like we're talking, but it's just talk. They don't. There's no organized embodiment of this talk. This talk gets nowhere because there's no organization, and I wish it were otherwise. Wouldn't it be great if we lived in a world where you don't need organization to change things, but you do. This kind of thing, you have to have an organization. And that I come to that conclusion very reluctantly. Been pushed into it by facts, by the facts on the ground over and over and over again. Anyway, so I was just to I guess overstate things a little bit. I don't think we should comfort ourselves that they know what they're doing. This character, I hope that this character knows what he's doing with this trip deal. I hope there was something else. I can't imagine what it would be though. I mean, look at Qatar again. Go back and look at foolish friends, our foolish friends in Qatar. I mean, they're rubbing shoulders with smart people. Plus, they have oil. Uh, that, they can't do it.
But
What
I
the
mean,
hell?
beyond all of this, like I think what's really, really troubling to me, beyond the facts of it, right? So, like Markar, you've listed all of the facts, including that, of course, Qatar has gotten bombed various times over the last few months, and so having a military base did not protect it, did not, help it at all, it seems. And so this fantasy that somehow American presence is going to help Armenia, factually is incorrect, historically has been proven incorrect in very recent history. But I think for me, in our last episode that we had a conversation with God and John Sezian, and we were talking about like how for some reason the Armenian American lobby, right, has for so long wanted recognition for the genocide from the United States, wanted recognition for the genocide from Israel, which it now I guess has, right? Like so fantastic, like Israel recognizes the Armenian genocide.
No, they didn't. He just said, unless you're referring to something I'm not aware of, Netanyahu just said his bullshit thing. And he, by the way, he's using the word genocide. Genocide is a safe word to use now for people like him because they have the word Holocaust. They're always in a separate category from everybody else. They got the word Holocaust. So,
Aside from that,
he
like
can throw this stuff around.
I don't know what his exact statement was, but Armenians have been celebrating that the American lobby, the Armenian American lobby, has been celebrating that finally we have recognition from Netanyahu and all of this. And I mean, and at this very historic moment, to trust the U.S. to solve a problem like war is so absurd to me because this is the same entity that is shelling out billions annually to massacre children,
Yeah.
In
Mhm.
what reality is this a trustworthy entity? Is this an entity you want to, shake hands with? That is like, I mean, that's like the ultimate gaslighting of like, here is, this here's a guy in a suit and he's recognizing that a terrible thing happened to you in the past. And it doesn't like his hands are like, dripping in blood, but like he's gonna shake your hand and promise you it's absurd. It's
It's absurd. And then some Armenians will tell you, and maybe it's a good thing. It's a good question. Well, what do we do? They run, they are America's surrogate from Morocco to the borders of Afghanistan. They run North Africa, Middle East. They run this whole show here. What can we do? All we can do is this. It's the same sort of story that some Armenians 85 years ago were telling with reference to the Third Reich. I'm talking about the Fourth Reich because I live in the Fourth Reich. The Third Reich. So well, okay, they're not real nice, but they're we got to be smart, and we got to be practical. Side with Hitler. He's invincible. 1,000-year Reich, like America's 1,000-year Fourth Reich, right? This is going to go on. Everything's going to be, yeah, more and more of the same, only way better for another 1,000 years. But yeah, so that kind of practicality. This kind of practicality. I'm talking about the practicality, among other things, of trip. Putting American, I mean, who got this idea? Putting American, I bet you, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this was Pashinyan's idea. We'll put Americans there. You can't touch Americans. Every one of them is like Spider-Man. So so we're gonna have Americans that they won't touch us, right? Just like in Fallujah, you got these guys. Anyway, I've already stated. I want to restate this. Tripwire is the word I'm using. Tripwire is the way I. Why would you invite them to your? Just smile and shut up. You don't have to always talk. You didn't have to have your damn meeting in Washington, D.C. You could have done it in Cairo or Athens or Rome. There are other cities you could have gone to, and then you're helping this guy out, this guy who has never helped you out. Oh, he should be nominated for the Nobel Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize. You know, perfect. You know, uh, yeah. And so this sense of exasperation. I mean, we're talking about gaslighting. There's also this sense of exasperation. This works rhetorical miracles too. The sense of exasperation, and I get the feeling that Trump is doing that day to day. Certainly here in the United States, he's exasperating a lot of Americans. Like, wait, Trump Gaza. Oh, wait, you're gonna sue this guy, although you don't have a case, and they're gonna settle out of court and give you $50 million. You're gonna withhold $1 billion in research funding for UCLA, my alma mater, because of anti-Semitism in UCLA. It's like a joke. Anti-Semitic, I mean, I don't. It's not that significant, but I mean, when I was going to UCLA, I mean, the administration, I mean, the faculty, it was. I would imagine that Jewish Americans were well represented in the administration, and that they are today. What do you mean anti-Semitic? So this is a sense of exasperation.
And most of
Absurd
the
things and get
anti-Zionist faculty at UCLA, as well as UC Berkeley, Judith Butler amongst them, right? These are Jewish Americans.
And
These
many of them are anti-Zionist or non-Zionist, or they're critical of Netanyahu. Many of them are, and we never hear about that either. But anyway, yeah, sorry.
And I think that exasperation is really also important in the context of Armenia too. And this is, I think, maybe what Milena was getting at with the grief, right? Like, I think Armenians are so exhausted. It's just so inundated that it's really hard to process a lot of what's even happening right now.
Well,
Yeah.
that is not to say that, like, it's not, I think that it's possible to do things while tired and exhausted.
Uh,
It's almost midnight for me and morning
oh,
for you.
okay.
But I'm just saying that, no, I do believe that it's like, it's possible for human beings to sort of like um, test the limits of their boundaries. And I don't always think that it's a bad thing to do that. I think this is how you learn about boundaries, and also you learn that you can go beyond, right? So I'm not trying to say this to sort of say that, okay, it's all this thing, like um I'm just saying that, I think it's important to consider when we think about, because I'm always thinking about, okay, so what's next? And that's my question, now also. We're getting near the end of this episode, and I'm always looking for solutions or alternatives. We talked so much about how, like, well, what's the alternative? And we I think it's really important to imagine alternatives. I just think that maybe it's not always like we say that, okay, well, we don't like this guy, that there needs to be another guy who's better, or who's whatever we think we're looking for. Maybe it's not a guy, maybe it's not something like, I'm not saying it's not a guy, it's a woman, because in many cases it also doesn't really matter so much when it comes to power, and this kind of power, not the the kind of power that we have when we speak about these things right now. But yeah, like it's just to consider what's next. So yeah, what's next? What I really want to sort of end this with a kind of dreaming, actually, because I
Tamar,
think that's such a powerful
yeah.
place to
I
be.
wanted to ask you, Milena. I also wanted to ask Tamar. Well, what are your ideas?
I was dreaming today of moving. I was really thinking about movement, um, connected with the body, and like really like um, how to be a body in these times and what that means, and how actually how difficult it is to be a body that is fully like in movement and moving with other bodies, because that actually means sort of defrosting, um, and continuing to breathe and continuing to experience and continuing to yeah, like allow for things to move. I think we're also in many cases we're also not allowing things to move because we think we yeah, anyway, that's just it sounds a bit abstract, but it's very material to me, like the
This
body
is
is very material.
abstract.
Yeah.
Well, last time I was in Yerevan, my niece was involved with this too. There were these young people just get together in the it was this was must have been June, July, August. They would get together in the Harabar Agnir and they would dance Schwarzbar in the Cascade. That was one area that they would just get together and dance. You were talking about movement and breathing, what to do next. I mean, I don't know. To me, yeah, I'm too old for that, but
Never
if I
too
were
old.
to, but it seems to me like a very kind of practical and also maybe even forward-looking place to go. This kind of move. The whole point is coming together. People come together very often. Something unexpected happens, or maybe something anyway, expected or not, something good happens.
Yeah, that is actually how I was going to also respond to that question of what now, what next. And I have been finding that thinking with others and talking with others and finding each other, because the we are not alone. There are many of us, right? But really the problem I think we have um on the left in general, but then I think also on the left of Armenia, in all of its iterations in general, is that we don't find each other much of the time, and we make islands and we have each other on islands, which is always great. I have Milena on my island, but we need something larger than islands here and there. We need to find each other, and I think that we can make a different world. We really can if we find each other.
Agreed. Here's a little bit of wishful thinking on our part. Sometimes it works out.
Always, we have to wish, right? We have to wish.
Yeah.
What
Well,
about
go ahead.
you, Markar? Because I think that you didn't actually, did you share what you kind of
Well,
just
I,
agreed
I
with that?
mentioned the dancing. I mentioned the dancing because it made such a big impression. My daughter go there to the Cascade and they're dancing too. But then you go there, you see them, a couple hundred people are dancing. And Why? I mean, who gave them permission? Nobody. They gave themselves permission. So maybe to this together. And I think you're going to think that this is a big jump, but I think that there's a connection between that kind of thing and the struggle for hegemony. The struggle for hegemony, I think, is really important. And you were talking about the left in general gave up on it before your generation, maybe half a generation younger, and it's nonsense. They're talking nonsense. Forget about, you know, I mean, so it's this kind of the old hippie thing, like Occupy or something like. You forget about hegemony. That's a you get that's going nowhere. That is guaranteed to go exactly where it went, nowhere. So there needs to be a struggle for hegemony, and the only way this can take place is if people come together and do exactly what you were saying, Tamar. They uh, start talking to each other, start hashing things out, start trying to make sense of our city, of our friends, of our group of friends, of this country. You know, so part of this is so I guess this is one thing. The struggle for hegemony is what I mean by that is like um, imagining using putting in putting into operation a new vocabulary, imagining something different, and there's a lot of updating that needs to be going on. There's a lot of specificity that needs to be going on. There's a lot of studying that needs to go on. And it doesn't have to take place in a library. It can take place other place, maybe at the Cascade. I mean, it can take place elsewhere. Coming together. I think this is the deal.
Thank you so much, Markar, for coming on our program for talking to us. This was really wonderful.
You honor me with your invitation. Thank you. Yeah.
It's been lovely getting to know you a bit also. So thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Okay, and best of luck with you. I hope you get lots of likes and get lots
Like,
of
click
subscribers.
the like, subscribe now. This is your call to do that. It didn't come from me this time. Do it now.
And comment also. Tell us what you think. Engage with us. All right.
Thank
That's
you.
all for today.
Bye bye.